I swear I'll be the best wife, she said as she set off for her 6-month journey. What would you do if your wife of 25 years suddenly wanted 6 months of freedom? No rules, no contact, and the possibility of seeing other men? Let me tell you what I did. Greg Thompson, CEO of Thompson Financial Services, had planned a surprise getaway to Italy for his wife, Sarah. Little did he know his life was about to take an unexpected turn. The company had been in his family since his great-grandfather's time, and Greg had worked hard to build a comfortable life. "Evening, sweetheart," Greg greeted warmly as he walked into the kitchen. Sarah looked up from the table, her expression emotionless. "Hey, I thought you'd be home earlier. What's with the big red envelope?" "Valentine's Day was last week. I had some important errands," Greg replied, setting his briefcase and the bright envelope down. "And this," he said, tapping the envelope, "needs to be dealt with tonight." He sat across from Sarah, noticing 2 glasses of red wine and a notepad in front of her. "How was your day?" she asked casually, though her tone suggested she wasn't really interested. "It went fine," he answered cautiously, his eyes drifting to the paper. "But judging by what's on the table, I feel tonight might be more significant." Sarah sighed deeply. "Yeah, you could say that. I've been doing a lot of thinking about where I stand in life and what I want to do with the rest of it." She explained that hosting her sorority's 25-year reunion, the passing of 2 classmates, and their kids leaving home had led to some soul-searching. "And now," she continued, looking into his eyes, "that brings me to us. This June will mark 25 years together. That's a long time. Half of my sorority sisters are on their 2nd or 3rd husbands. So where do we go from here? What's keeping us together?" Greg listened closely. "I hear what you're saying. I've had similar thoughts. Some guys hit a midlife crisis, buying sports cars, chasing younger women. Luckily, I haven't caught that bug. I've got an amazing wife who keeps me grounded. So what can I do to make the second half of our lives worth waking up to every morning?" "That's why I love you, Greg," Sarah replied with a soft smile. "Most men ignore their wives' problems, but I've got a solution in mind. My whole life, I've lived under someone else's roof. First my father's, then the sorority house, and then here, the house your grandparents gave us. I've never truly been on my own." She continued passionately. "Living with you has been wonderful, but it hasn't always been fulfilling. I'm always the wife, never the star. You're the sun, and I'm just a moon orbiting you. I need to break out of this orbit or I'll lose myself." Taking a deep breath, Sarah said, "I need to leave. I want a break, a whole pass, a freedom frenzy, for 6 months. During that time, I'll live elsewhere, and we won't have any contact. It's going to be tough, but when the 6 months are up, I'll come back, and we'll decide on a plan for the rest of our lives together." Greg stared at her, stunned. No contact at all. Cutting off communication entirely seems extreme. Our lives are so connected. How would that even work? "It would be as though we were no longer married," Sarah explained calmly. "We'd go our separate ways, focusing on individual interests and new experiences." She talked about enrolling in courses and exploring different viewpoints. "It's like a divorce, but without bitterness. We'll just be 2 lovers apart for 6 months. Military couples do it all the time." As the gravity of her words hit him, Greg felt a wave of dread. "You mentioned you'd act like a single woman and socialize. Does that mean you'd be dating other men?" he asked, his voice strained. Sarah gave a small smile. "Probably, though I doubt anyone will be eager to take me out." Greg's face tightened. "So if you're dating, are you also thinking of being intimate with them?" he pressed. "Probably," she replied nonchalantly. "How else can I fully explore my experiences as a woman? You're the only man I've ever been with. I just want to be on the same level as you." His expression darkened. "You're forgetting one important detail. We're married. I promised all my future experiences would be with you, and you made that same promise to me. I've been faithful, and I expect you to do the same." "We'll see how things unfold over the next 6 months," Sarah said dismissively. "We can make that decision once my vacation is over." "You might not have the chance to return to my life," Greg shot back. "You could just keep living with someone else, and it wouldn't be me." "Oh, stop being so melodramatic," Sarah scoffed. "It's just physical, nothing more. When we get back together after 6 months without it, you'll be glad we're back on track. Please don't make this a bigger deal than it is. I'm trying to improve myself, And the confidence I'll gain will make me a better lover for you and more fulfilled in every aspect of my life. Greg felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. This idea of going 6 months with zero contact seems way too drastic. Couldn't we try to work on these issues through counseling instead? He suggested. But Sarah shook her head. I don't want to just talk about change. I want to actually do it. It has to be a clean break, or I'll keep leaning on you for everything. I need to feel like we're not married anymore, so I can come back with a new perspective. I don't know if I can handle that, Greg admitted quietly. No, Greg, I need to overhaul my mindset as soon as possible, she insisted. We'll face the stress for 6 months, not let it drag on for years. It's better to do it now. When are you planning to move out? Greg asked, his voice hollow. I've already rented an apartment for 6 months, and will start moving my things over this weekend, she replied, as if it were the most ordinary decision. Greg felt the ground slipping away. Can we talk more about this before making such a huge change in our lives? Sarah reached across the table to take his hand. Thank you so much for discussing this with me. I really believe it'll make our lives better in the long run. I love you for being so understanding. Greg pulled his hand away. You're putting too much faith in me. I can't wrap my head around why you're doing this, and honestly, I don't support it at all. Looks like it's going to happen whether I agree or not. My feelings don't seem to matter. He abruptly stood up. I'm overwhelmed right now. I don't even know what to ask or how to talk about this. What do you say we head to bed and revisit this tomorrow night? Are you coming to bed, or has the separation already started? Not just yet, love, Sarah replied. I want to sort out the logistics of my move, but I do plan on joining you in bed tonight. Greg slowly climbed the stairs, feeling utterly drained. He collapsed onto the bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind was a storm of questions and doubts. Later that night, he felt Sarah slip under the covers, nestling against his back. She pressed a soft kiss on his shoulder and whispered, I'm so sorry, Greg. I'm sorry too, Sarah, he answered quietly. I love you, she murmured. Is this the last time I'll hear that from you? He asked, pain edging his voice. I want our lives to be better, not worse. After I go on this journey, she whispered back. I plan to come back to you as a better wife and lover. The next morning, Greg woke up early, skipping his usual routine of bringing Sarah coffee in bed. Instead, he left the house and sat in his car, texting his friend Tommy from the dealership. He needed practical advice. After explaining Sarah's plan, Tony listened and then looked at him grimly. Sounds to me like she already has a guy in the picture, but isn't ready to fully commit. She wants to explore it before she decides to leave you for good. If she's happy with this guy in 6 months, you're out. If he turns out to be a dud, she'll come back acting all rejuvenated. You're basically the backup plan. How do I avoid being used like that? Greg asked, feeling a knot in his stomach. Cut her loose, and the sooner the better. Tony declared firmly. Take control of the situation. The day she moves out, you file for divorce on the grounds that she left. A divorce takes around 6 months anyway, so if she's really leaving, it'll be ready to finalize. If for some reason you want her back, you just refuse to sign the final papers. The key here is that you make the call, not her. Tony went on. And remember, if she cheats and you take her back, it'll only make it easier for her to cheat again. Stay the good guy. Don't get angry or yell. Losing your cool will only create more problems down the road. Leaving the dealership, Greg noticed a sleek black BMW convertible on the lot. On a whim, he decided to buy it. I'll probably get more use out of this than I did with anything this past year, he told Tony with a wry smile. When Greg returned home that evening, Sarah was there, clearly on edge. Greg, sweetheart, where are you? She called out, anxiety in her voice. I missed you this morning. Can we talk? I've got a lot on my mind after our conversation yesterday, Greg replied evenly. Thought a drive would help clear my head. I can take the day off if you need to talk, Sarah offered, her tone softening. I know I rocked your world last night, and I'm really worried about my amazing husband. Just tell me what you want to do. I need more time to wrap my head around your plans for this separation, he said quietly. I'll head to the office, shut the door, turn off my phone, and really think about the future. How about we plan to have dinner together at our usual time tonight? I'll pick up some food. Sarah quickly agreed. That evening, as they sat down to eat, the tension was thick. Greg listened as Sarah outlined her plans for the apartment and the courses she planned to take. When she asked if she could take some of their furniture, he nodded stiffly. Thanks for being so thoughtful, she said with a smile. You really are a great person. Greg swallowed the sarcastic reply that came to mind. Instead, he said, I doubt you can fit all your stuff into a 1,200 square foot apartment. What are you planning to do with everything else? When Sarah suggested leaving some of her things at the house, Greg shook his head firmly. If you're leaving, then everything goes with you. You can't use this place as a backup while starting a new life. As the reality of moving out began to hit her, Sarah's excitement started to waver. You're being unreasonable, she snapped. What am I supposed to do with it all if I can't leave it here? If you want to be independent, why are you asking me? Greg replied icily. You could always rent a storage unit. Their discussion quickly devolved into bickering over practical matters. Finally, Greg decided to make his position clear. Listen, Sarah, after our initial talk, I did some reflecting. While I'm without a wife around, maybe I should think about whether it's time to trade you in for someone else. Sarah's eyes widened. Trade me in? What exactly do you mean by that? Just like if your car gets old and unreliable, you trade it for a newer model, Greg explained calmly. Maybe it's time I trade my wife in for someone younger and more interesting. Now hold on, Sarah growled. I'm doing this to become a better woman for you. There's no reason for you to go out looking for a new wife. I do not like that idea one bit. And I'm not a fan of your plan either, Greg shot back. But you made it clear I don't have a say in your decision. You didn't think about how I might feel having a cheating wife. So while you're off doing what you want, I'll be doing the same. Let's see how this plays out. The argument escalated until Sarah stormed out of the house. Greg was left alone with his thoughts, the unopened red envelope containing plans for their trip to Italy still sitting on the table. In the following weeks, Greg threw himself into work and began to explore his newfound freedom. He redecorated the house, replacing family photos with sports memorabilia. He grilled steaks on the patio and blasted jazz music, all the things Sarah had never allowed. Meanwhile, Sarah moved into her new apartment and began attending classes. However, her enthusiasm was dampened by the growing distance from their children, who struggled to understand her choices. As the weeks turned into months, both Greg and Sarah found themselves in uncharted waters. Greg, though reluctant, attended the court-mandated sessions as their divorce proceedings moved forward. Meanwhile, Sarah dove headfirst into the single life, going out with her divorced friends and basking in the attention. However, a chance encounter in Dallas with a charming stranger named Tom set off a chain of events she never saw coming. As the 6-month mark loomed closer, tensions grew. Sarah became increasingly sure that Greg would welcome her back with open arms. But Greg had changed. Her betrayal had left a mark that couldn't be erased. Finally, the day arrived when they met to finalize the divorce. Sitting across from Sarah in the attorney's office, Greg looked composed. The attorney shuffled the paperwork. Both Greg and Sarah signed the final decree as they had agreed. Then Greg turned to her. Do you have anything you'd like to say? He asked, his expression unreadable. Sarah took a deep breath. It's been a long 6 months without the love of my life by my side, but facing adversity has given me a chance to grow. I'm now a more enlightened woman, more dedicated to our marriage than ever. I have to thank my loving, devoted husband for allowing me to spread my wings. Greg listened silently. I swear I'll be the best wife from this day forward, she continued. I'll be there for you in every way. I promise never to put you through something like this again. Greg took a moment before responding. I appreciate your words, Sarah, but I have a question. Have you been faithful to me during these 6 months? Sarah blinked, caught off guard. Yes, of course. I've remained faithful, she replied. Greg's expression hardened. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photograph, laying it on the table. The image showed Sarah kissing Tom in a Dallas nightclub. Have you been faithful? He asked again, his voice steady. Sarah stammered, her face flushing. It was just a kiss. It didn't mean anything. I wasn't thinking clearly. Greg continued, his voice growing colder. Our son saw you. He was in Dallas for a conference and saw his own mother in a crowded club, trying to hook up with some random guy. Can you imagine what that did to him? Tears welled up in her eyes. No, she cried. I want to be your wife again. Please forgive me. I promise I'll be faithful from now on. Don't do this to me. But you already did this to us, Greg replied firmly. You made choices without considering the consequences. I'm moving on. Sarah broke down, collapsing into sobs. Please don't push me away. I'm so sorry. I'll never make this mistake again. But Greg was resolute. Goodbye, Sarah, he said, standing up. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. As he left the office, Greg felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The chapter with Sarah was closed. Outside, he took a deep breath and headed toward a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, Greg focused on healing and moving forward. He reconnected with old friends and even started dating again. One evening, he found himself sharing dinner with Tara, a woman he'd met during a business conference. What's next for you? Tara asked, her eyes warm. Greg smiled softly. I'm not entirely sure, but for the first time in a long while, I'm excited to find out. Well, whatever it is, I hope it includes happiness, she said, raising her glass. To new beginnings, Greg replied, clinking his glass with hers. As they sat together, Greg realized that while the past had been painful, the future held promise, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, Greg and Tara spent more time together, their relationship blossoming naturally. They attended art galleries, went hiking in the nearby mountains, and enjoyed long conversations over dinner. Greg found himself smiling more, feeling a renewed zest for life that he hadn't experienced in years. One sunny afternoon, while strolling through a local farmer's market, Tara turned to him. You seem happier lately, she observed, her eyes reflecting genuine warmth. I am, Greg admitted. I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying until it was lifted. Being with you has been refreshing. She smiled softly. I'm glad to hear that. You deserve happiness. Just then, Greg's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. An unexpected message from his daughter, Emily. Asterisk, Dad, can we meet? There's something I want to discuss, asterisk, concerned, Greg replied, arranging to meet her at a cafe they both loved. The next day, Greg sat at a corner table, sipping his coffee when Emily walked in. She looked a bit anxious but greeted him with a warm hug. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? He asked gently. She took a seat across from him. I've been talking to Mom, she began cautiously. She's not doing well. I think she's struggling more than she's letting on. Greg felt a mix of emotions, concern, residual hurt, and a touch of irritation. I'm sorry to hear that, he replied carefully. She misses you, Emily continued. I know things ended badly, but maybe it would help if you two talked. Greg sighed. Emily, I understand your concern, but your mother made her choices. I've moved on, and I'm not sure reopening old wounds is a good idea. I get that, she said softly. I just wanted to let you know. Maybe some closure would help both of you. I'll think about it, he promised. After Emily left, Greg sat for a while, contemplating. Part of him felt a lingering sense of responsibility towards Sarah, but he also recognized that he'd started a new chapter in his life, one that he wasn't willing to jeopardize. That evening, he met Tara for dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant. The aroma of fresh basil and garlic filled the air as they settled into a corner booth. You seem preoccupied, Tara noted, reaching across the table to touch his hand. He gave her a reassuring smile. Just had a conversation with Emily about Sarah. She's worried about her. Tara nodded thoughtfully. Do you feel obligated to reach out? I'm not sure, he admitted. I don't harbor ill will, but I'm also not eager to revisit the past. That's understandable, she said gently. It's okay to care about her well-being without getting pulled back in. You're right, Greg agreed. I just don't want to cause any more hurt for anyone. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, Tara assured him. A week later, Greg received a letter in the mail from Sarah. He hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. Asterisk, dear Greg, I hope this letter finds you well. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that happened. I wanted to apologize sincerely for the pain I caused you. My actions were selfish, and I regret them deeply. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to express my remorse and wish you happiness. Sincerely, Sarah asterisk. Greg reread the letter, feeling a sense of closure. He decided to respond. Asterisk, dear Sarah. Thank you for your letter. I accept your apology. I hope you find peace and fulfillment in your life. Best regards, Greg asterisk. After sending the letter, Greg felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He shared the exchange with Tara during a weekend getaway to a lakeside cabin. I'm proud of you, she said, sitting beside him on the dock as the sun set over the water. It takes courage to forgive. I couldn't have done it without you, he replied, wrapping an arm around her. She rested her head on his shoulder. I'm glad we're walking this path together. As time passed, Greg and Tara's relationship deepened. They discovered shared passions, like cooking elaborate meals and exploring jazz clubs. One evening, after a particularly joyful day, Greg took Tara to the place where they first met, a charming little bistro downtown. I've been thinking, he began, his eyes meeting hers across the candlelit table. These past months with you have been incredible. You've brought so much joy into my life. She smiled, her gaze warm. I felt the same way. He took a deep breath. I love you, Tara. Her eyes glistened. I love you too, Greg. They embraced, both feeling a profound sense of happiness and anticipation for the future. Meanwhile, Sarah focused on rebuilding her life. She sought counseling, reconnected with old friends, and even started volunteering at a local nonprofit. Though she still felt the sting of her past choices, she was determined to learn from them and move forward. A year later, at their son Michael's graduation party, Greg and Sarah saw each other for the first time since exchanging letters. Greg arrived with Tara, their affection evident. Sarah approached them cautiously. Hello, Greg, she said softly. Tara. Hi, Sarah, Greg replied politely. It's good to see you. You too, she responded, offering a tentative smile. She turned to Tara. I've heard a lot about you from the kids. Thank you for being so wonderful to them. Tara smiled graciously. They're great kids. You've done a wonderful job raising them. An unspoken understanding passed between the three. While the past couldn't be changed, they could all choose to move forward with grace. As the evening progressed, Greg watched his children celebrate, laughter and joy filling the room. Tara squeezed his hand. They're happy, she remarked. They are, he agreed, feeling content. Later that night, as they drove home, Greg reflected on how far he'd come. The pain of the past had been replaced with hope and love. Tara, he said, glancing over at her, there's something I want to ask you. She looked at him curiously. What is it? He pulled the car over by a park where they'd often walked. Taking her hand, he knelt down. Will you marry me? Her eyes widened in surprise, then filled with joy. Yes, Greg, yes, I will. They embraced under the starlit sky, both filled with excitement for the life they would build together. In the months that followed, wedding preparations were in full swing. Greg's family welcomed Tara with open arms, and even Sarah sent a heartfelt note wishing them happiness. On a beautiful spring day, surrounded by loved ones, Greg and Tara exchanged vows. As they looked into each other's eyes, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. After the ceremony, Greg's daughter Emily approached him. I'm so happy for you, Dad, she said, hugging him tightly. Thank you, sweetheart, he replied. That means the world to me. As the sun set on their wedding day, Greg felt a profound sense of peace. Life had taken unexpected turns, but it had led him to a place of true happiness. Walking hand in hand with Tara, he looked forward to the future with optimism and joy, grateful for second chances and the journey that had brought them together. As Greg and Tara's relationship grew stronger, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Greg found a balance between work, his newfound hobbies, and spending time with Tara. Meanwhile, Sarah, still reeling from the consequences of her decisions, had quietly retreated into her own world. It was about 3 months after their final divorce papers were signed that Greg received a call from his son, Michael. Dad, can we talk? Michael asked, his voice tinged with concern. Of course, son. What's on your mind? Greg replied, already sensing this wasn't just a casual check-in. It's about Mom. She's not doing great, Michael began. I've been visiting her, and she's pretty down. She doesn't talk much. But when she does, it's mostly about you. I think she regrets everything, but she won't admit it. Greg sighed, feeling a familiar knot of guilt and frustration twist in his stomach. I understand she's struggling, but I can't change what's already happened, Michael. We both made our choices. I get that, Dad. I'm not asking you to fix things. I just thought you should know how she's doing. She's lonely and honestly kind of lost. Greg paused, weighing his response. I appreciate you telling me. I'll check in on her when I can. But you need to remember, this is something she has to work through herself. After hanging up, Greg sat in his living room, Tara out for a work trip. He couldn't help but think back to the day Sarah had first told him about her plans for their 6-month separation. Her face was so resolute, so sure that what she was doing was for the best, for both of them. And now, here she was, living with the aftermath. A few days later, Greg found himself driving through Sarah's neighborhood. On impulse, he pulled into the driveway of her apartment complex. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should even be there. But then he remembered Michael's voice on the phone, filled with concern, and decided to knock. Sarah answered the door, looking surprised but not entirely displeased to see him. Her once vibrant demeanor was subdued, her eyes tired. "Greg?" she asked, stepping aside to let him in. "Hey, Sarah." Greg greeted her, offering a tentative smile. "Michael's been worried about you. Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." Sarah motioned for him to sit down in the modest living room. The place was tidy but felt cold, as if it was missing something. Perhaps the warmth of a family home, or maybe just the energy Sarah used to carry with her. "I'm fine," she said, her tone unconvincing. "Just adjusting, I guess." Greg studied her, seeing the cracks in her facade. "Sarah, you don't have to pretend with me. I know this hasn't been easy." She let out a bitter laugh. "Easy? Greg, I thought I had everything figured out when I left. I thought I'd come back a better person, a stronger woman, more fulfilled in ways I couldn't explain. But I was wrong. All I did was destroy what we had. And for what? I don't even know anymore." Greg felt a pang of sympathy for her, despite everything. "We both made mistakes, Sarah. But you still have a chance to rebuild. It's not too late." Tears welled up in her eyes as she shook her head. "I just wanted to be free for a while, to find myself. But I didn't realize that I was already losing everything that mattered. I hurt you, I hurt the kids, and now I'm paying the price." Greg sat in silence for a moment before speaking. "You're not alone in this, Sarah. Yes, you made choices that hurt all of us, but that doesn't mean your life is over. You need to forgive yourself first." She looked at him, truly meeting his gaze for the first time since he'd arrived. "I don't know how," she whispered. Greg stood up, walking over to her. "Start by taking it one day at a time. Focus on building something new, not just mourning what's lost." Sarah nodded, wiping her tears. "I'll try. I don't expect anything from you, Greg. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For everything." Greg placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a gentle squeeze. "I know, Sarah. Take care of yourself." As he left her apartment, Greg felt a sense of closure that hadn't been there before. He wasn't angry anymore. The bitterness had faded, leaving behind only the hope that both of them could move forward, even if on separate paths. Later that evening, when Tara returned from her trip, Greg told her about his visit with Sarah. "How do you feel about it?" Tara asked as they sat together on the couch. "Honestly, I feel relieved," Greg admitted. "I think she needed to hear that she still has a future, even if it's not the one she imagined. And I needed to let go of any lingering resentment." Tara smiled softly. "I'm proud of you, Greg. It takes a lot of strength to move on with grace." Greg leaned over, kissing her forehead. "I've learned a lot from you about grace, Tara." Life continued on, with Greg and Tara growing closer, their bond stronger than ever. Greg's relationship with his children also flourished, as they began to see their father as a man who had not only survived a painful chapter of his life, but had emerged from it with a newfound sense of purpose. Months passed, and Sarah slowly began to rebuild her life, taking Greg's words to heart. She started volunteering regularly at a local shelter and found solace in helping others. Though she still carried the weight of her past mistakes, she no longer let them define her. One evening, Greg received an unexpected text from Sarah. "I just wanted to thank you for stopping by that day. I've started to make peace with everything, and I owe a lot of that to you. I hope you're happy, Greg. You deserve it. Greg smiled softly as he read the message, feeling a quiet sense of contentment. He replied simply, "You deserve happiness too, Sarah. I wish you the best. And with that, Greg knew the past had finally released its hold on him. His future, with Tara by his side, was brighter than he'd ever imagined. The lessons of loss, forgiveness, and second chances had shaped him into a man who understood the value of both love and freedom. As Greg and Tara walked hand in hand through their neighborhood one crisp fall evening, he looked at her and smiled. "I wouldn't change a thing," he said softly. Tara squeezed his hand in return. "Neither would I." The future, once uncertain and filled with pain, was now wide open and full of promise. Together, they were ready to embrace whatever came next.